All right, and welcome to the Running Coaches Connection podcast. I'm Takashi Gould, and I'm joined with Rolando Eccleston today. So, unfortunately, no Dave, no Carl this evening, as they got a few things going on and living busy lives and whatnot. But we're very excited to get you introduced, and with us today is one of our speakers at our MITCA clinic coming up here, just in about a month and so from now. Is Rachael Steil, who is an author, and she is a former high school runner at Grandville High School. She was a very accomplished runner at Aquinas College. And then now she is working in an investment management group, as well as going back to her alma mater and coaching the girls programs, or helping coach the girls programs at Grandville High School. So Rachael, thank you so much for making time with us today and joining us at our podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So your website, quick plug in here. It's www.runninginsilence.com.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. I'm really impressed by it with the blog content that you have, the videos that you have, and it seems like you've been having a lot of you're able to get on a lot of different, or is it mediums of just not just promoting your book, but bringing light into more awareness to this eating disorders in athletes, particularly of runners.
Mhm.
So I was really amazed by it, and I think this is an incredible tool that coaches can familiarize with themselves enough of. So I want to
Yeah.
thank you for this and
Yeah.
doing what you do. Um, but maybe you can talk about a little bit for us and share with us your real running background, and where did you get your start and how did you get involved to where you are now?
Yeah. So I started running when I was about 5 years old. My mom had been running before I was born, so I grew up watching her run and just kind of aspired to do the same thing. She gave me like little workouts here and there, not workouts, but I guess different distances to go run every other day. So I had a really healthy attitude with running growing up, and she always emphasized to have fun with it. And of course, being the competitive person that I am, I wanted to be winning races and everything. And I just really enjoyed racing as a whole. So when I entered middle school, I joined the cross country and track team, and I did pretty well in high school. I was like 26th at the state meet my senior year. So it was a good steady progression throughout those years. And of course, I wanted to run in college. So I made my decision to run at Aquinas. And things went seemingly pretty well that first year with some big PRs. And after that, I developed an unhealthy relationship with food and running. And that kind of what led me into writing the book and talking about it and actually going into coaching a little bit too. So,
Mm-hmm. So that's pretty awesome and neat to hear of that you grew up in a running family.
yes.
So then just being introduced to it at such a young age, and just so you've always had that support system there. Um,
Yeah.
that's
Very healthy relationship with running growing up. My parents were amazing with their support and, like I said, the encouragement to enjoy the sport.
yeah. And then if I'm looking at this right, looking at your athletic.net profile here, it's you were a part of the Mid East team.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So it's funny because I'm involved with the Mid East team in the programs. Um,
Okay.
and how was your experience with that? Did you have fun with it?
Oh my gosh, it was a blast. I really enjoyed being able to run on that new team with people from like I'd raced against in high school. So it was just fun coming together for that weekend, and I felt really good at that race. So it was a wonderful experience. I really liked that.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about that is we get to see always like the kids keeping in touch and growing up later and keeping in touch, and sometimes they run in college together or something happens. So
Yeah.
So, how has being an author and being and having that opportunity to share your story and getting it out there, how has that changed your life? I'm sure it was therapeutic just to be able to speak. I mean, just talking to you before this, you speak so openly about it, and I think that's real cool. That's real difficult thing to open up like that. So, how has this all changed your life?
Yeah, it's made me a lot more open about my experiences because I think growing up, I was so reserved. And I had like a perfectionist personality, which I think a lot of runners kind of have. And I think that's part of what makes us so driven and hardworking with running. So, writing about my difficult experiences with my eating disorder just really pushed me to push myself out there. And I saw that by voicing my own story, I was able to help other people talk about these difficult issues as well. So it made me more aware of other people struggling outside of myself, and that by speaking up, it makes us more relatable, and that it's okay to make mistakes. I didn't have to be such a perfectionist. I didn't have to base so much of my worth in running fast times and everything. And I'd always wanted to become an author since I was a young girl. I just didn't realize it was going to be about eating disorders and running. I thought I was just going to be writing about running because it's such a big part of my life. But yeah, just voicing all really changed my life for the better.
How does that help you with coaching now, being on the other side of it? Do you are you able to recognize things a little bit sooner? You think it? I mean, have you had to deal with it as a coach? Not trying to get too personal about it, but
Yeah, it really pushed me to talk about it for the team. It's easy to talk about easy is kind of relative, but it's easier to talk about my experience, on the internet through running in silence in my book, but to actually go back to the high school I ran at and talk to high schoolers was a whole different experience for me, and I was actually really nervous because I didn't, I think some of us worry that we're going to trigger an eating disorder to happen by talking about it. Um, and I'm sorry, I forgot the original question.
no, I was just seeing if you've had to deal with it
Oh, right.
as a coach. Yeah, having an athlete that could be going through this stuff. Have you had that?
Yeah,
Uh,
I was kind of surprised how often it was kind of occurring. Not that it happens to everyone, but like even within my first year of coaching, I was like, oh, this isn't an issue that's happening like, even in high school. Um, so I almost felt blessed that I was able to have that position to help intervene and talk with specific people on the team that expressed that they were struggling, and it made me even more glad that I brought up. Again, I was nervous bringing it up. Like, oh, schoolers, I don't know if they deal with this as much. And to realize that they do, and that by having me speak up about it allowed them to speak up, just a reflection of what had been happening and how I spoke up as well.
do you feel like that's a real big component of dealing with these type of eating disorders is speaking up and just like first and foremost getting it out? You think this is to you is that a big step, the big first step?
Yes, that is huge. I mean, my website is called Running in Silence for a reason.
Right.
I was running without speaking about it because I felt ashamed. I felt like my body was broken. I felt like I was the only one going through it. I didn't think anyone had a similar experience. And when I spoke up about it, I realized so many other people were experiencing very similar issues. So I feel like when we tell our stories, it's therapeutic, but it also helps other people. And I feel like the sooner you talk about it, the sooner you're going to go seek help or realize it's an issue and kind of break that denial.
Right.
So, who for you has been inspirational to you and has given you confidence to share your story?
I would think it was my professor at Aquinas. I was an English major, and he was my advisor and professor, and he actually helped me get started on my book. We did like an independent project together. But for a few of the classes, he was talking about how writing about what made us uncomfortable or writing about our truth was so much more interesting to people. So that really pushed me to start talking about my eating disorder, because the parts of the eating disorder where I was binging and gaining weight, that was really difficult for me to talk about. It's kind of like the ugly side of it that I was not comfortable with, but I knew that if I wanted to be an author and writer someday, that I had to talk about those gritty things. So I think that was what initially got me writing about it and then starting the website. So he was really inspirational and, just pushing me to write about those things that were not comfortable.
That's pretty incredible because I fully expected you to say something like, it's like maybe it was your college coach who noticed it, or it was a staff member, or it was like a friend that noticed it and spoke up. But instead, it was a completely random, almost a classroom assignment that.
Yeah.
But you also had to take that first step and take that initiative to be like, okay, I feel safe here enough to talk about this.
Yes. And that was what was so wonderful about choosing a college, not just for the sport, but also for the academics, and just knowing that I was going to feel appreciated and get the help I needed as a student and not just an athlete. Because if something happened to my running, which it did, I had my academics, it was all about balance.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's incredible. It's awesome.
So now that you have a lot of experience with this topic and recognizing these eating disorders, do you find yourself paying attention to other athletes at other schools, or just at any meet or whatever, and just kind of always having that extra set of eyes on lookout for signs of these people going through different things? And have you ever had to even approach another person from a different team about it?
I never feel like it's my place to approach someone from another team about issues like that, especially because I feel like eating disorders go so much more beyond just appearance. So someone could lose weight, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have an eating disorder, even if they do look unhealthy. And that's the biggest thing I learned about when I first developed my eating disorder, is that it wasn't all about weight. I mean, there's a point where I had gained a healthy amount of weight and then beyond, but I was still dealing with eating disorder thoughts and issues. Um, so I don't think we can really tell if someone has an eating disorder just by looking at them, and especially if I'm not coaching that team, there's no way for me to know. So I feel like my best responsibility at this point is to share my story and my insight and encourage other coaches to talk about it with their team, because they're the ones who know their teams best and their athletes. And part of their responsibility, I feel, is talking about these difficult subjects, or at least bringing someone else in who's like an expert with us to talk with the team, just so that the athletes feel that they can speak up about it if they feel like they're dealing with issues like this.
So, like, for me as a boys coach, it's a little bit different, because a lot of times when you hear athlete eating disorder, particularly runner eating disorder, the stereotype is, we're thinking about girls. But I'm sure there's boys that, or even in college, guys that deal with this and aren't sure about, how to seek for help, or maybe even coaches that don't know. So what advice can you give to coaches to help recognize some of these similar situations then?
So I would say if someone is kind of isolating themselves from the team, um, I mentioned that like weight doesn't necessarily indicate an eating disorder, but there are physical side effects sometimes. So if someone looks like they might have gained or lost a lot of weight, that could be a sign, but it doesn't mean they have an eating disorder. And then biggest thing is isolating themselves. There might be mood changes. I know for me, when I first developed anorexia, I was feeling very depressed, and I don't know what came first, either the depression or the restricting of food, but either way, I could barely muster the energy to even talk and engage with my friends. My running performances were great at first and then dropped poorly. I just wasn't racing well. I didn't have the energy to race well. Um, so I would think those are the biggest signs. Maybe if you can notice, like during pasta dinners or something, if they're avoiding going to those team meals, or only eating certain foods, or they have big fear foods, like foods they just do not eat at all. They totally eliminated them. Those kind of changes I feel like would be red flags. And those kind of things can happen in both women and men. I think the only big difference is for women, like losing their period.
So Actually, I got a question here. So, do you think you're going to do like, it took you a while to write the book, you said. I think you said you
Yeah.
started around 2011, 2012. And
Yep.
then you were able to find a publisher and got it published November of last year.
Yes.
And do you think you'll have, is that something that like you like, hey, that's the one thing on my checklist, my bucket list, so to speak, and I'm done? Or do you think you want to keep writing about other things, or whether it's related to this or related to running, or
Yeah, I wrote my second book already. Just
oh
because
wow.
I can't stop writing. It's very closely related to my running. I can't stop. Um, yeah, so I wrote that one already, and I'm in the process of editing and revising it with any time I have outside of, doing book promotion and presentations for the first book. But the second one is still about running. I ended up breaking my kneecap while I was running in my senior year of running at Aquinas. So I talk about dealing with injury as an athlete, and I broke my kneecap, so I talk about breaking it and also breaking away from the running world and that transition out of college into, I guess you could say, regular life, and how difficult that transition can be. So, because I feel like a lot of, high school athletes or college athletes or even Olympians come home from the greatest race of their life, and suddenly they kind of fall into this depression where they're struggling with their identity, they're struggling with what they want to do with their life outside of their sport. So I really look into those subjects in the second book.
Gotcha. No, that's awesome. That's incredible. I sure already have a second book done. I'm
Yeah.
excited to hope that. Do you think you'll be able to go to the same publishing company?
Sorry, say that again?
Do you think you'll be able to go through the same publishing company?
Yeah, I think so. I really enjoyed with Kohler Books for the first one. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Oh, well, I think we're all looking forward to that.
How bad is the breaking your kneecap? That just makes me hurt just hearing that.
Yeah, how'd you do
Yeah.
that?
I'm like halfway bugged out. Like, man, that didn't even happen to me. I'm laying down and that hurts. My knees
Right,
hurt.
right. Because Ro played football growing up. Like he played football in college. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I remember you telling me about breaking your kneecap.
Never broken anything, man.
When I broke it, it didn't hurt at the time it actually broke, which is kind of bizarre. I think we were in the middle of a mile time trial when it happened, and I hadn't had any pain beforehand. It just randomly kind of just cracked in half. um, and I think I had so much adrenaline going that I still finished the workout and then realized when it was swelling and getting pretty painful that something went wrong. So the most painful part of it, I had to get two surgeries. One to get the hardware placed in the knee, and then the second surgery to get the hardware out. And I still had another fifth year cross country season after that. So I was trying to prepare for the next cross country season after the kneecap broke. So it was a struggle, painful emotionally and physically for sure.
I can imagine. Just curious, was that at all tied into the eating disorder at all?
They think it could have been a potential part of it, part of bone loss or osteoporosis. I don't have osteoporosis. I would say probably more bone loss. But they were also might have just been like a violent contraction of the quad while I was running. So maybe it's a combination of things, but we couldn't quite pinpoint how or why this happened because it's so rare that it even happens this way.
Right.
So
No, I asked because I know we were talking before, and I'm kind of dealing with some of that in my program, and have been. And there's a particular athlete a couple years ago who got a stress fracture in her fibula, and that was so odd. We couldn't figure out how that happened on a non-weight bearing bone, and turns out, because of her eating disorder, she was crazy calcium deficient,
yes.
and that's how that happened. So that's when you said that, I was just curious and connecting a couple of dots.
Right. Yep. And I suspect that could have been part of it. And I've heard numerous stories of people breaking their bones years after they developed their eating disorder. Someone was running a race and broke her hip while she was racing. Like, there are horror stories with these bone breaks, and it's heartbreaking too.
Right. Whew, that just makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm glad that I have not broken my kneecap. My goodness.
Hey, just shift a little bit here in a different direction. No,
Yeah.
maybe in a lighter direction.
Yeah.
Okay, coming up at the MITCA clinic, can you maybe touch a little bit upon what you'll be talking about and presenting about?
Yeah.
Like, you don't gotta give us the whole talk, obviously. We want people to show up to your sessions.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, they can shed a little light on that.
Yeah, so I will be talking about my story in detail just to give them insight into one experience. And I feel like it's a good reflection of a lot of runners' experiences with eating disorders. And I battled a few like I had anorexia, developed into binge eating, and bulimia. So I had a little dose of each one. And I feel like by sharing our experiences, it just gives more insight. And then what I have done as a coach to approach this subject, and what I feel are the best ways to talk to athletes who we suspect might have an eating disorder, how to talk to parents as a whole about eating disorders and prevention, as well as talking to the entire team each year about this subject. Because again, I feel like talking about it is the best way for them to feel they can approach you about it. So yeah, it's mostly going through my story, what I feel like we can do as coaches, different causes of eating disorders, ways we can prevent it, how I recovered, how we can help our athletes recover. I definitely touch on male eating disorders as well, because I feel like we don't talk about that enough as well.
Gotcha. Well, that sounds certainly things that I know. Like, I'll be there for that. I highly encourage our listeners and people that are attending the MITCA clinic to be there and attend those sessions, because those are, like you said it yourself. It's at least from me and the male perspective, it's something that it's so foreign to me. I'm not familiar with it that much, and but like any other issues, you have to attack that head on.
Yes, absolutely.
So I really appreciate it.
So now you're coaching at your alma mater, Grandville High School, and it seems like things are going well. What were some of your challenges transitioning from being an athlete to a coach, and then going back from the collegiate level, back to the high school level? How's that been going for you?
Yeah, it was definitely a different shift, because to tone down the workouts a little bit, I started to notice I had planned the workout season and realized it's probably a little too intense at times. So I knew we could easily adjust, and we did that this season. That would probably be the biggest challenge with that. And then coming up with a plan to talk about eating disorders and mental health with the athletes, because I knew I was preaching this, but I also had to put it back to myself. And I think that um, almost humbled me a little bit too, to realize how difficult this is for a lot of coaches to talk about. I mean, I'm someone who's gone through the situation, and I still see how tricky it can be. So I wanted to offer a plan to help other people with that. But yeah, I think overall my experiences throughout high school and college helped me to come back to the high school level and be able to use my experiences to help others. Like, I went through a host of injuries. I battled a lot of mental, just normal mental blocks when you're running. So we talk about that a lot. And when those girls bring up those kind of issues, I'm very familiar with them, and we try to work through them together. So I think overall it's been a good transition, but definitely had to change a few things from the college scene.
Right. But that's still got to be very rewarding for you to just be able to know that you're that kind of a resource that's been through a lot of things that these girls are going through. I know one thing for me as a coach, like Takashi mentioned, I played football. I never ran cross country, so I always wonder sometimes if my team is just like, well, what do you know? You're a big dumb football guy. What is this? So it's cool to have those experiences to fall back on. It seems like it's going well. You guys had a good meet. The 30th. What was that? Yesterday.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was really great.
Yeah. See, it looks like everybody's PR just about, at least the top 6 or 7 girls did. So that's
Yep,
good.
yeah. We usually have some good PRs for that meet. It's a good flat course. It's a lot cooler by now. Their mileage, they're starting to get used to the workouts and everything. So it was a good confidence booster on Saturday. Really good day. I love seeing them happy and excited for the rest of the season.
Nice. Oh yeah, and are you guys running at Portage this upcoming weekend?
We are, but it's also Grandville homecoming.
Oh
So,
man,
like,
we know that battle.
yeah, and we don't run until the afternoon. So,
Right.
Right.
yeah, we saw some people, but I'm kind of surprised how many are still going to race. I mean, I know they love that race. So, we still have a bit of a crowd, but not everyone on the team is going because of homecoming.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So we asked this question in the last podcast, and now that it came up, I just want to ask your opinion, because we're all part of that cross country coaches network on Facebook, and I know this is one of the things that came up was about a coach having to deal with athletes missing time for homecoming, or what was it, Takashi? She had to get a hair appointment or something like that.
I think it was, yeah, I think it was a due appointment.
Yeah, something like that. So what is your perspective on that? I mean, we talked about it last week, and I just
Yeah.
want to know what other people feel about it.
Yeah. So our biggest thing was they could decide, like, if they wanted to run at this meet or not. It was optional. But especially for varsity, there's more on the line because if a girl who is supposed to be running varsity went to homecoming instead, that meant she probably wouldn't be running varsity for the conference meet. So they have that big decision, and most of them know it's a fast course. It's a really cool meet. So I feel like it was just up to them where their priorities were and whatever worked best for their situation, but we left it up to them.
Sounds fair. You just have to roll with it. It's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
kids have to make decisions, and I hate. I don't want to sound like an old grouchy man, even though everybody who knows me knows that I am. But it's just like I just see a lot of these kids just want what they want when they want it and how they want it sometimes, and they don't want to make a decision. And you just have to make a decision. You cannot have it your way all the time. If you want to do prom or homecoming or the hairdo or whatever, that's up to you. But every action is gonna have a reaction, and you might not like it.
Right. And we know this is a tougher meet. It's so late in the day. Usually for homecoming, we didn't schedule a meet or the meet was early in the morning, so most of them were. We understand the difficulty with this one, so we're trying to be more flexible.
Right.
I think we have
It'll be a
a
fun meet, nevertheless.
yeah. I think we have a boy that's on our team that's he's taking one of the like what is it? He did an SAT or ACT that morning. So him and his family found a testing site out by Portage Middle School. They're gonna drive up there on Friday, stay the night at a hotel so he can knock out the test and then come to the meeting.
Wow, that's dedication. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was pretty wild. I was like, all right, yeah. I mean, it makes sense if you know you gotta knock this out. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I know when it comes to things like dances and homecoming, prom, and track season, those are completely different battles.
Yes. Yeah.
So
They're touchy situations sometimes. I don't know.
that's life.
Yup. That's what makes it all fun.
Yeah. Well, hey Rachel, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your evening here on a Sunday night. And again, her website is www.runninginsilence.com. She's got the book out. She's going to be at the MITCA clinic. We highly encourage everyone to attend her sessions. Um, again, can't thank you enough for making time to talk with us about a lot of things that I think they can be uncomfortable to talk about and address, but they have to happen, for the betterment of the kids and the betterment of the athletes and the programs. So we really appreciate you taking time to join us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad that you're acknowledging, as a coaching community, that this is an important subject.
Absolutely. And Hey, we're looking forward to catching up with you in person once we're up there at the clinic in Mount Pleasant. So
Yeah, that'll be great.
cool, awesome. All right, well, hey, thanks again, and you have a good night.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel.
Thanks. Bye.